What would you say if a cop asked one simple question and your own answer gave them a reason to dig deeper? Most drivers don't get trapped by what officers find. They get trapped by what they say. Subscribe right now because what you're about to hear is easy to forget when your heart starts pounding on the side of the road. Hit like too, so you can find this video again when you actually need it during a real traffic stop. In the next few minutes, you're going to learn the exact lines that keep you calm, keep you short, and keep you from handing over extra information for free. You're going to see how one harmless-looking answer can turn a warning into a longer stop, how one polite sentence can shut down a consent search, and how one question can tell you whether the stop is really over. Most people have no idea how fast a normal stop can turn into a fishing trip. I've analyzed over 200 body cam videos and the same pattern keeps showing up. Drivers talk because they think talking looks innocent. Then they guess, ramble, joke, explain, confess small things, and create big problems. Let me show you exactly how to avoid that. This is not about being rude. It's about being calm, respectful, and smart when your words matter most. Now let's talk about why this matters so much for you. A traffic stop feels small. You think it's just a broken light, a missed signal, maybe going a little too fast. But once that window comes down, everything you say becomes part of the stop. Your tone matters, your timing matters, your story matters. And if your story changes even a little, that can be used against you. Here's the reality. Most drivers think the danger is in the search. The real danger usually starts way earlier, with your mouth. You try to explain why you were speeding. You explain where you came from. You explain why your friend was in the car yesterday. You explain why you look nervous. And every extra sentence gives the officer more things to question, compare, and remember. If you learn nothing else today, learn this. Your goal is not to win a roadside debate. Your goal is to get through the stop without giving away more than the law requires. The first thing you need to do is stop confusing being polite with being chatty. You can be respectful without becoming your own witness. When the officer asks where you're coming from, where you're going, why you're in a hurry, whether you've had anything to drink or why you seem nervous, your instinct is to explain. That instinct is exactly what gets people in trouble. Here's exactly what you say. Officer, here are my license, registration, and insurance. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I will comply with lawful orders. Word for word. Memorize that line. It is calm, it is clear, it is short, and it tells the officer you are not going to fill the silence with free information. Why does this work for you? Because talking feels safe, but it creates risk. The more you say, the more chances you have to be misunderstood. Maybe you say you're coming from your cousin's house, then later you say your aunt was there too. Now it sounds like your story changed. Maybe you say you only had one drink, and now the stop turns into a drinking investigation. Maybe you blurt out that you were reaching for your phone, and now you just admitted distracted driving. Watch what happens when you keep talking. A basic stop becomes a conversation. The conversation becomes suspicion. The suspicion becomes more questions, and the stop gets longer. Bad way. Most drivers say, "I'm sorry, officer, I was just trying to get home. I only had one beer, I'm tired, and my friend borrowed the car earlier." Then the officer has 4 new things to dig into. Good way. Smart drivers say, "Officer, here are my documents. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I will comply with lawful orders." Then the officer has less to work with and has to focus on the real reason for the stop. Defense attorneys use this exact line in court because short, clear words are easier to defend than nervous rambling. And yes, this can feel awkward the first time you say it. That's normal. But awkward is better than incriminating. Awkward does not get entered into evidence the way your own statements can. There's legal backup for this too. A case called Berkmer v. McCarty matters here. In plain English, the Supreme Court said a normal traffic stop is serious enough that your words still matter even if the stop feels temporary and casual. Another important lesson comes from cases like Salinas v. Texas. Plain English again. Just sitting there quietly is not always enough. If you want to use your right to stay silent, say so clearly. Don't play guessing games, use the words. Your silence protects you better when you clearly claim it. That is why this tactic is so powerful for you. You're not being difficult, you're being precise. Have you ever been tempted to explain yourself just to seem innocent? Drop a comment below because that urge is exactly what gets so many drivers in trouble. Now let's go to the second tactic because this is where people give away their strongest protection with one single word. If an officer asks, "You mind if I take a quick look?" Or, "You don't have anything illegal in the car, right?" That is not a small talk moment. That is a search moment. Listen closely because this is critical. Here's exactly what you say. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." Those exact 8 words. Say them calmly, say them once. If they ask again, repeat it the same way. "Officer, I do not consent to any searches." This is 100% legal. Why is this so important for you? Because consent changes everything. If you say yes, even because you feel pressured, you just made it much harder to challenge the search later. You might think, I've got nothing to hide. But that is not the point. Cars have old receipts, borrowed bags, medicine bottles, tools, locked containers, other people's stuff, and all kinds of things that can be misunderstood. Once you consent, you lose control fast. Legal experts agree this is your strongest protection during a traffic stop. Not arguing, not lecturing, not being clever, just clearly refusing consent. Bad way. Most drivers say, sure, go ahead, I don't have anything to hide. Then the officer can start looking through the car and you've made that choice easier for them. Good way. Smart drivers say, officer, I do not consent to any searches. Then you keep your rights in place even if the officer decides to act anyway. And let me be clear for you. Refusing consent does not guarantee the search won't happen. The officer may claim another reason. They may call for a dog. They may say they see something in plain view. But if you consent, you remove a major legal issue from your side before the fight even starts. If you refuse, you keep that issue alive. That matters later, a lot. This comes straight from Supreme Court rulings, especially Florida versus Humano. In plain English, that case shows how broad consent can become once you say yes. If you let an officer search your car, they may be allowed to open places and containers that could hold the thing they say they're looking for. That little sure can spread farther than you. Think. Here's the reality. You do not help yourself by making their job easier. You help yourself by being calm, respectful, and clear. Officer, I do not consent to any searches. That line gives you protection without raising your voice. Watch what happens when a driver knows this line. The whole tone changes. The stop stays cleaner. The officer knows this person is not volunteering away rights for free. The third tactic is the timing move almost nobody uses right. Here's the trick they don't want you knowing. A traffic stop is supposed to be about the reason you were stopped. Your light, your speed, your tag, your lane change. Once that job is done, the officer does not get endless extra time just to go fishing, unless they have a real reason tied to facts. So after the warning or ticket is handled, after your documents come back, after that main mission looks finished, you ask one simple question. You look at the officer and say this, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Those exact 10 words. Let me show you exactly why that question matters. That question forces a fork in the road. If you're free to leave, then leave calmly. If you're being detained, now the officer has to own that decision. They can't just keep you hanging in soft, confusing small talk forever. Most drivers never ask. They keep standing there answering bonus questions. Where are you headed now? Mind waiting a minute? Got anything illegal? Can I search? And because they never ask whether they're free to go, the stop stretches and stretches. Bad way. Most drivers say, sure, I can stay, no problem. What do you need? Then the stop keeps growing and growing. Good way. Smart drivers say, am I being detained or am I free to leave? Then the officer has to make the status of the stop clear. Former police officers have confirmed this works because it changes the stop from vague to specific. It makes everyone deal with the real issue. If the officer says you are free to go, you do not stay to keep chatting, you leave. If the officer says you're detained, then you know the stop has changed, and you should go right back to being silent and not consenting to searches. There's powerful legal backup for you here too. Rodriguez versus United States is the big one. In plain English, the Supreme Court said police cannot drag out a traffic stop longer than needed just to chase unrelated suspicions without more facts. That means the stop is not supposed to become a never-ending interview. Your question helps mark that line. Now be smart with timing. Don't blurt it out in the first 10 seconds while the officer is still walking up. Wait until the basic traffic work looks done. Ticket or warning. Documents returned. That's your moment. Most people already clicked away. If you're still here, you're in the top 10%. Drop a comment saying I'm still here because this next tactic is where calm people protect themselves best. Now let's cover the tactic that saves you from making a bad roadside moment worse. Sometimes the officer gives you an order you do have to follow. Step out of the car. Turn off the engine. Keep your hands where I can see them. Move to the curb. If that happens, do not argue on the shoulder like you're in a courtroom. Here's exactly what you say. I do not consent, but I will comply. Short, respectful, powerful. This is 100% legal. It protects your position without turning the stop into a physical conflict. Why does this matter so much for you? Because some drivers think refusing a search means refusing every order. That is a terrible mistake. If the officer orders you out of the car, arguing does not usually help you. It usually escalates the stop. But you also don't want your compliance twisted into consent. That is why this line matters. I do not consent, but I will comply. You are separating cooperation with a lawful order from permission for extra intrusion. Bad way. Most drivers say, no, you can't make me get out, or fine, do whatever you want. Then the stop gets tense, and your words can sound like resistance or consent. Good way. Smart drivers say, I do not consent, but I will comply. Then you stay safe, you stay calm, and you keep your legal position cleaner. Pennsylvania v. Mims is the case you need to know here. In plain English, the Supreme Court said, an officer can order a driver out of the car during a lawful stop. So don't fight that on the roadside. Save the fight for later if your rights were violated. The road is not the place to win a legal argument. The road is the place to avoid making things worse for yourself. I've seen this over and over in body cam footage. The calm driver who complies without consenting usually does much better than the driver who turns every moment into a challenge. That does not mean you surrender your rights. It means you protect them in a smarter way. So now you have the 4 lines. The first line stops the rambling. The second line blocks consent. The third line tests whether the stop is actually over. The fourth line lets you comply without giving permission. Together, those lines do something powerful. They reduce confusion, they reduce risk, and they keep your mouth from doing more damage than the stop itself. Let's tie the law together in plain English so you can remember it under stress. Berkmer v. McCarty reminds you that a traffic stop may feel casual, but your words still matter, and they can still be used later. That's why you do not explain too much. Florida v. Ximeno reminds you that consent can open the door much wider than you think. That's why you clearly say you do not consent to searches. Rodriguez v. United States reminds you that police do not get endless extra time to hold you there once the traffic job is done. That's why you ask if you are being detained or free to leave. And Pennsylvania v. Mims reminds you that some orders, like stepping out, can still be lawful during a stop. That's why you comply without consenting. Here's the reality. These cases do not make you magically untouchable. They give you a map. If you use that map, your odds get better. Laws can vary by state, especially around identification, so know your local rules. But these core ideas are strong, simple, and built on real law. Now let me walk you through a full stop so you can hear the wrong version and the right version in your head. You get pulled over at night for rolling through a stop sign. Your heart is pounding. The officer walks up and asks where you're coming from. Wrong way first. You say, I'm coming from my friend's place. I wasn't drinking. I'm just tired. I'm trying to get home. The car isn't even really mine. My cousin let me use it. Now you've created a pile of extra issues. The officer hears possible drinking, borrowed car, nervous speech, and too much detail. Then they ask if there's anything illegal in the car. You answer, no, you can look if you want. Now you've opened the car. Then they hand back your documents and keep chatting. You stay there and keep answering. 20 minutes later, you're still on the roadside, and the stop is now way bigger than the stop sign. Now the right way for you? The officer asks where you're coming from. You hand over your documents and say, Officer, here are my license, registration, and insurance. I'm exercising my right to remain silent, and I will comply with lawful orders. The officer asks to take a quick look. You answer, Officer, I do not consent to any searches. The officer gives you a warning, hands your papers back, and keeps talking. You ask, am I being detained or am I free to leave? If they say you're free to go, you leave. If they order you out of the car at any point, you say, I do not consent, but I will comply. That is the clean version. That is the safe version. That is the version that gives your lawyer something to work with later if needed. Watch what happens when your words stay simple. The stop has less fuel, the officer has fewer openings, and you have fewer chances to talk yourself into trouble. Next week, I'm revealing what to say when cops claim they smell weed. Subscribe right now because that one turns simple stops into full car searches every single day, and you need that script before you ever hear those words in real life. So let's lock this in. First, give the required documents and stop explaining. Your job is not to talk your way out. Second, if they ask to search, use the exact line and refuse consent clearly. Third, once the traffic job is done, ask if you're being detained or free to leave. Fourth, if you get a lawful order, comply without consenting. These 4 moves do not make you rude. They make you disciplined. And discipline is what protects you when stress is high and every word counts. Hit subscribe so you catch that next video on the smell of weed claim. Smash that like button if this script just made you rethink every traffic stop you've ever had. And drop a comment telling me which exact line you're going to memorize first. Stay safe out there.